G'day and welcome to Market Sam After Work. Today I want to do another video on firearm bans or gun bans. This one's a bit more about the whole world. I will touch on where we're at in Western Australia. We do have, for those people who don't know, we do have a gun ban looming over here, termed a buyback, but really it's a confiscation, and it's really taking some high power, long range cartridges or choices off the table, is what they're actually talking about. Peculiarly, it's ones that are deemed to be more threatening to the police, like might be able to pierce armor and things like that. The energy factor is all relevant, which is a strange situation given there's no civil war over here. So yeah, that's its own little conversation. For us in the way of the state, where the firearms community is doing is formed an alliance, the West Australian Firearms Community Alliance, which is basically getting a seat at the table for all the different parts, be it the hunting, be it the farmers, be it the different forms of sport shooting, whether it's shotguns or handguns or whatever it is, but everyone having a seat at the table. So a bit more of a coming together, so to try and resist the divide and conquer tactics that happen from the political and police side of things. But that's what we're up to there, and when I have more information on that, then I'll let you know. But like I said, the video is as much about the rest of the world. For those that don't know, it's all over the world, this same sort of thing's happening. Now, not necessarily that caliber or that type of thing, a cartridge ban. In some cases it's semi-automatics, where semi-automatics are still around. We've already been through that. It's the semi-automatic side of things. In other cases it's handguns. It's actually all over the world. Obviously from the UK, that's been heavily hit a fair while ago, but it's even filtering through to where states in the US of A. Some of those states are starting to fight their own Second Amendment. So it's complicated, but I suppose without getting too deep into it, I would say one of the things that in some of those conversations that I've sort of been involved with and listened to and that type of thing, something that struck out as to, well, I suppose a few things. One would be generally the firearms community is probably actually could rate at the highest level of safety in the way of what our sports are. In the enthusiast side of things, in the sporting side of things, we have extremely good numbers in the way of safety side of things. If you want to compare it with pretty much any other sport or enthusiast occupation, then our firearms, because a little bit of the nature of what it is, from it is largely not a huge amount of physical activity, so that right up to the very old and the very young can all participate in this sort of thing, because used with obviously brains about what everyone's doing, but it is something that is low body damage side of things by the nature of what firearm shooting is. There are obviously far more active sides to the sport as well, but it's a bit to that, but it's also to do with our culture in the firearms community. There is a lot of discipline. It is something that all the disciplines that go with a firearm, because it can be dangerous if used incorrectly, like a lot of things, not quite as much as an automobile or all sorts of other things, but because of what our sport involved around means there is a lot of disciplines to it, and that means that there's a lot of safety in mind all the time. We show that by the numbers and also by the nature of the people that tend to be doing it. These are all very good things, and there's lots more very good things, from skill building to, in whatever form, to whether you're a hunter or a pest controller or a sport shooter or whatever it is. There's all sorts of those same strengths and disciplines that we have. And then I suppose I'd look at the argument when we come forward as to resisting gun bans, which are, like I said, all over the world, from Ireland to New Zealand to Canada to US, to all over the world, there is this sort of thing happened or happening. And our argument really is, well, we know what's happening. It's trying to disarm the population, and there's all the malevolent forces that are doing, whether that's world governments or individual police stations or whatever it is, that are pushing down that road through. Basically, but what it comes down to, yes, there is the other side of things, the political side of it, in the bigger socialism side of things that potentially is in that place. But every time we come across with that argument, that is very easily shelved off as gun nuts and a negative side of things. It doesn't make it not real, but it's very easy shelved over there. That argument has been very thoroughly countered by the other side of the fence. Now, the other side of the fence, and I suppose what I'm actually talking about there and leading into, is that yes, there is the political and the legal wrangling that we're doing, but our bigger place where we can actually do anything good, this is at least in my opinion, the bigger place we can ultimately do things is by the voting masses, the people that these people, the politicians and the police forces are trying to win votes with. To a large case, that's what it's about. They're trying to use it as a voting tool to get more votes by the say, we'll take the guns off those guys, off the people with the guns. Now, we can go through all the arguments of a gun as a inanimate object, and it is not the problem, it's the people, and those arguments are completely sound and completely right. The problem is we're using logic, a pragmatic way of thinking about things, and we're using logic and history and all those things that prove this, that we're completely right. The trick is we're not dealing with an animal, the other side of the fence. They're not logical and they're not pragmatic. To the largest degree, they're not. They are indoctrinated, they are emotional, there's all sorts of tactics and a very, very thorough bad press, propaganda against firearms that we're dealing with. So attacking that or fighting that with logic and history and all the bits and pieces is actually already been covered. That doesn't really work to the largest degree. In a legal sense it might, in some forms of political sense it might, and once you get people out of that indoctrination, then you can talk that conversation. But while they're in it, that conversation really largely falls on deaf ears. But something that I did hear amongst all these things, and it's sort of, I know some clubs are doing it, I know some people do it, but let me tell you this little bit of the story. There's a MP, or there's a member of parliament in some form or other. I think it's in the national government. But the comment was what they do quite regularly is they organise days where they get a group of politicians, staffers, the political network out to their range and set up something to go and have a shoot with. So they actually go out and take them out for a day with firearms so that they can be around them, but understand that they're not scary things, and take the demon out of the equation, let them enjoy and do that side of things. And as much as it's only a small organisation doing that, but they are doing that and it's quite positive. They get people that really take that fear away and really change their perception of things. It's not in the name of trying to get more members. It's in the name of just trying to educate a little more, but also attaching to the fact that it's an emotional conversation we're actually talking about. Take away that fear and replace it with something that is, well, okay, well, that wasn't terrible and the people aren't terrible. As simple as that sounds, I do believe that there's a certain level where if all clubs started to do more of that, find an angle into that, find a way to actually put forward a better PR. We are all, as shooters, tend to want to stick to our own beeswax, don't really want to be out in the limelight, don't really want to do these sort of things. In the club, everyone's fairly conservative, they enjoy themselves, that little thing, but there's people, as you probably know, that where even telling your neighbour you've got firearms there might be an issue in your neck of the woods. That really happens. Bringing out firearms in a social situation is to talk about something that you're interested in. That doesn't really work. It's like talking about politics or talking about religion. It's this, okay, that's a taboo subject. It's easier just to not talk about it. And that's something that in some nature or other we've all learned, and that's to make it so that we get on with everyone better and that side of things. But it's also our negative. It's actually a problem because that same thing builds more naivety about the subject, and it lets the bad propaganda have more effect. So if we as clubs worked out ways to do this, whether it's corporate days to get people in, whether it's there's obviously lots of days where team building exercises and things from the middle city sort of corporations and businesses in there, which will go to paintball guns and things like that and do that sort of thing. If we actually come up with a way that we can do that, all safety in mind, all that sort of stuff, not about trying to convince people in any other sense, more trying to just let them do it, let them feel it, let them touch it. And the more that we can do of that, the less the fear is real. it turns more into, it may not be their cup of tea for sure, but if it can still be fun, and I suppose that's where I think you got where I'm going with that angle. I know there are clubs that already do it. I know there are individuals that already do it. But I think it is probably, if it's conceivable to do that 100 times more than we're doing it now, then you only need to move a certain number of the masses to a certain percentage of the masses to take away the fear. It takes away the angle for the politicians to be able to sell that as something to work on. And to be truthful, yes, I think to a large degree, most of the world, when it comes down to it, as much as there's all the other larger malevolent forces or insidious forces that are in charge of world governments and running things, they may have a little drive down that road. But with every politician, what it really comes down to, where most of this comes down to, it's simply votes. They're just looking at the next term. That's what they just want to get in. So if there's something that's valuable they can actually sell, and the likes of picking on guns is a very popular thing. If we can take it to where that's not as valuable to them because people aren't as frightened of them anymore, then that can change things. I obviously realise there's a lot of other propaganda that's there, and that's with the likes of Hollywood, and that's with the likes of, be it the gaming side of things and all that sort of stuff, that use the aggressive, deadly force of a firearm as a sale. And of course, that's not how it is in our world at all. But we can't get them to see our world until we get them to be less frightened of our world. So I suppose I'll stop babbling on. I'm sure there's a lot smarter people out there with this sort of idea, but I think working on our PR in a positive sense, not just strong sense, but also in a family friendly, have family days, have corporate days, have team building days where the club puts this on and puts the effort into this, potentially can be the part of turning the tide on a push that's coming, as I said, worldwide. Anyway, that's my little one. Put your comments down below. Let us know what you think. I think it's worth a discussion anyway. Thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.